fast fighter jet slowly reduces its speed over the ocean as it approaches the deck of an aircraft carrier which rises and falls with the waves, while another jet is screaming off the bow, going from 0 to flight speed in under seconds. But here's what the movies don't show you. That deck is the roof of a 100,000-ton warship, a floating city displacing as much water as a skyscraper, stretching over 330 meters from bow to stern. Naval architects figured out how to turn this massive platform into a precision runway where jets can land at 130 knots and launch to 150 knots, all while the ship itself pitches, rolls, and yaws with every wave. What's really going on is a chain reaction. One cable absorbing the force of a truck, hydraulic systems kicking in below deck, entire ballast tanks shifting to keep the ship steady. And then, within seconds, another jet is getting catapulted into the sky. From an engineering standpoint, it's two almost impossible problems solved simultaneously. So, we are going to take it apart. The physics, the mechanisms, the history. Not just how it works, but how we got here. It's 1914, World War I. Steel hulls are replacing wooden ships. You're commanding a nation. Germany is mobilizing. Do you build up your naval power, invest in cavalry, or gamble on the new technology, tanks and artillery? Do you form alliances, or prepare to stand alone? That's the world you enter in Supremacy 1914, today's sponsor. It's a real-time strategy game where you lead an actual World War I nation. Manage naval blockades, forge alliances, command artillery against up to 499 real players in matches that unfold over weeks. You're controlling borders, economies, armies, and fleets in real time. And here's a bonus, including Lawrence of Arabia himself with a value of $15 US. Now, back to how modern machines change war strategies. An aircraft carrier landing area runs about 150 to 200 meters long, roughly the length of 2 football fields. For most fighter jets, that's barely enough distance to stop, or get airborne. But the real problem isn't length, it's that nothing stays still. The deck shifts constantly, pitching up and down, rolling side to side, yawing with the waves. All 6 degrees of freedom in motion. You'd think a ship this massive would barely notice the ocean, but when your landing target is the size of a tennis court, even 2 degrees of tilt puts you dangerously off target. Carriers compensate with active stability systems. Below deck, massive ballast tanks hold thousands of tons of seawater. Pumps shift that water port to starboard, bow to stern, balancing for aircraft, weight, sea conditions, and dynamic loads in real time. But stability systems can only do so much. What actually made carrier aviation possible were 2 distinct engineering breakthroughs. But how did we even get here? Before anyone thought you could land a plane on something that floats. Back in the early 1900s, ships like HMS Hector carried tethered observation balloons, not to launch attacks, but to spot them. It was a surveillance craft. Then came World War I, and with it, improvisation. Passenger liners like HMS Empress and HMS Riviera were converted to seaplane carriers. The planes couldn't land back on board. They'd touch down on the ocean and get hoisted up with a crane. But the real breakthrough came from a stunt. In 1911, pilot Eugene Ely flew a Curtiss pusher biplane onto a ship's deck using little more than weighted ropes to stop him. And it worked. Over the next few decades, navies added rudimentary systems, cables, brakes, wooden flight decks. But when jet aircraft arrived after World War II, everything changed. Jets were faster and heavier. Suddenly, those old systems weren't enough, so engineers responded with arresting gear and catapults. And in the 1950s, Britain introduced the biggest design shift of all, the angled flight deck. We'll see how each of these changed the game. Stretched across the deck are a series of thick cables, essentially tripwires anchored to powerful hydraulic systems below. The pilot's job is to catch one with a metal hook attached to the tail of the plane. The tail hook hangs just a few inches off the ground during approach. When the cable catches, it yanks the aircraft from 130 knots to 0 in about 2 seconds. The arresting system absorbs tremendous force, up to 120,000 pounds, roughly 540,000 newtons. That's equivalent to catching a fully loaded truck dropped from a highway overpass. That 120,000 pounds of force doesn't disappear. It transfers through the arresting gear, down through the flight deck and through the ship's frames, all the way to the hull. The deck isn't just bolted on top, it's built into the ship's skeleton. Reinforced beams, heavy frames, and gear foundations that go 3 decks deep. These vessels are designed to handle thousands of arrested landings over 50 years without fatiguing the hull. The cables themselves are high tensile steel wire, wrapped and tensioned to extreme standards. After several hundred landings, they get replaced. A cable failure at 130 knots leaves no margin for error. Landing is half the equation. To sustain operations, you need planes off the deck just as fast. And a jet can't generate enough thrust on its own to take off from 300 meters of moving deck. So, powerful pistons beneath the deck accelerate a fully loaded aircraft from 0 to 150 knots in seconds. The principle is straightforward. Controlled explosive force applied through a shuttle track connected to the aircraft's nose gear. Modern US carriers run on 2 nuclear reactors, each generating 140,000 shaft horsepower. That's 280,000 horsepower total, driving 4 bronze propellers capable of pushing this vessel past 30 knots. That speed isn't just for maneuvering. Every knot of ship speed translates directly to wind over the flight deck. A fully loaded FA-18 needs about 30 knots of wind across the deck to launch safely. If there's only 15 knots of natural wind, the carriers make up the difference. We can even calculate it. Wind over deck equals natural wind plus ship speed. So, if the required wind over deck for launch is, say, 30 knots, and there's only 15 knots of headwind, then ship speed equals 30 minus 15, equaling 15 knots. The carrier will speed up to 15 knots to make up for the missing headwind. With nuclear power, a carrier can operate at high speed for weeks without refueling. That sustained capability makes 24/7 air operations possible. For decades, carrier decks were straight. That created a lethal problem. Miss the arresting cables on landing and you'd crash into the parked aircraft at the far end. Pilots either stopped in time or they didn't. No third option. The British solved this with a simple geometric change. Tilt the landing area about 10 degrees off the ship's centerline. Now if a pilot missed the cables, they could throttle up and go around. That's called a bolter. The angled deck did something important. It enabled simultaneous operations. On a straight deck, you could either launch aircraft or recover them, one at a time. With an angled deck, you could do both. Launch from the bow while recovering on the angled runway. All this hardware means nothing without the people running it. On deck, specialised crews coordinate every movement. Yellow jackets direct aircraft with hand signals. They direct aircrafts on the deck. Green jackets operate the catapults and arresting gear, airwing maintenance and cargo handling. It's their job to manage takeoff and landing. Purple jackets, commonly known as the Grapes, they're aviation fuel handlers, responsible for fueling and defueling aircrafts. The red guys are the ordnance personnel. Their primary responsibility revolves around handling ordnance, including loading missiles, bombs, and ammunitions onto aircrafts. Blue is worn by aircraft handlers and elevator operators, moving aircraft to and from the flight deck to hangars. Landing signal officers stand at the deck edge, monitoring every approach, ready to wave off a pilot if something looks wrong. They typically wear white. For night operations or low visibility, pilots rely on the optical landing system. From the cockpit, they see a glowing ball of light, the meatball, moving against a row of green reference lights. Meatball centered means you're on the correct glide slope. Above the lights means you're high, below means you're low. The call is simple: fly the ball. Modern systems back this up. GPS, data links, software that smooths out the controls when conditions get rough. Meanwhile, the bridge crew positions the ship for optimal operations. They calculate heading based on wind speed, direction, and sea state. targeting that 30 knots of wind straight down the deck. The navigator reads the ocean, choosing the headings that minimize pitch and roll. Sometimes they'll alter the course 20 degrees just to smooth out deck motion. When the sea state exceeds operational limits, everything stops. Even the best pilots can't land safely when the deck is pitching 6 meters with every swell. Despite all the engineering, failures happen. Sometimes it's weather, sudden gusts, rolling waves, visibility dropping to nothing. Sometimes it's mechanical, arresting gear malfunctions, catapult failures, blown tires, hydraulic failures. Pulling off this system hundreds of times a day in weather that would ground most airports on a platform that's constantly moving. That's why carrier aviation remains the most demanding operation in military aviation. Think you have what it takes to lead a nation through World War I? Play Supremacy 1914 for free. Use the link in the description to claim your free starter pack containing Lawrence of Arabia himself now.